All right. Okay, we're coming up in five. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Santita Jackson Show here on AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. It's a joy to be with you. I hope you had a wonderful weekend. What a time. What a
I'm
time.
sorry.
I mean, it is like, well, we'll start again. Just hold on.
Okay, please. I'm
That's
a
okay. That's okay. And I'll tell them to start at 1 minute. So just well, I got 20 seconds. It's okay. It happens. As this in the arts, we call them happy accidents. So we'll be up in 10. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Santita Jackson Show here on AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. I hope you had a fabulous weekend. Did you go to Hands Off to any of those hundreds of rallies we had around the country? So many people did. I was at another rally, but boy, oh boy, oh boy. Everybody I know, everybody was rallying at some point yesterday. And, or should I say on Saturday. By the time you hear this, it'll be Sunday, it'll be Monday, but Saturday, that's when we had the marches. And everybody was on their way to one of these marches or they were going to watch it because it just seems like more and more is getting put into everyone's wagon and it's getting heavier and heavier. With the Doge cuts, people are losing their jobs. People are afraid that their Social Security checks will not get there. In many instances, the checks have already slowed down because we don't have the workforce to staff Social Security. Social Security didn't collapse. They've not missed a check in more than 90 years. They've not missed a period. It's being collapsed. And it's being collapsed on myths. And we need to talk about that. We need to look at these tariffs, which are taxes that are really being passed on to not the manufacturers, not wholesale, but to the consumers. So if you saved up to buy that car, well, guess what? It's going to cost you a whole lot more money immediately. That happened, 12:01 Saturday morning? And what about, just the basics, the necessities, toilet tissue, soap, food. Well, before you do a run on the stores, remember that gives the corporations an excuse to raise their prices also. Because whenever they see not just a need, but a neediness, they take advantage of it. We've not recovered from COVID. They have yet to drop those prices down. Price gouging is a real thing. Vice President Kamala Harris was on to something, and we will talk about that book, Fight, at some point. Ooh, Livonia Perryman, I know you got to talk about it because all the quiet part's being said out loud now. But this is the way politics works, everybody. But getting back to the point, the issue at hand, let's talk about these hands-off rallies. Let's talk about what you're experiencing right now between the tariffs, the Doge purges, worrying about your checks, worrying about your Medicare, your Medicaid, SNAP benefits. We're seeing layoffs at HHS. When you see this kind of collapsing, you have to wonder what is really going on here. Some of this is above my pay grade because I don't think the American government is collapsing. I think it's being collapsed. To what end? Why? What's going on? In the meantime, Americans are suffering. Americans are afraid. But Americans, given our own resilience, Americans are now beginning to take to the streets. Americans are now beginning to organize. So I want to know what your thoughts are. Hey, Andre. Hey, Robert. Shalom, Robert. Bernadette. And to all of my brothers and sisters of the Muslim faith, hello, Dr. Alia Amar. I know you're going into Eid. Is that it? Okay, now you got to get off mute. All these brilliant ideas that are being muted at this moment.
Yes, let me take it off. I'm so sorry.
It's
Yes,
okay.
we just completed Eid. It was wonderful. So Ramadan Mubarak, Eid Mubarak to everybody who was celebrating. And to all of all of our Catholic friends and Christian friends who are in a season of Lent, we wish you peace and blessings as well.
Absolutely. All of these holidays, holy days, if you will, they converge. We are one, everybody. We are one. May God bless you. So, everybody, I want you to weigh in on X at Santita J, at Santita J, and on Blue Sky, santitajackson.bsky dot social, santitajackson.bsky dot social, and the Santita Jackson and Friends Facebook page. Please become my friend there. Please, please. That's the only place where I can accept friends.
Mhm.
So many of you continue to go to Santita Jackson, and I'm so grateful. And if I haven't accepted your friendship, it's because I can't. I'm blocked, and they continue to kick people off. That's why I need you to go over to the Santita Jackson and Friends Facebook page. It's a fan page. Doesn't mean I love you any less. It does mean that I can interact with you there. I can't interact with you on the so-called landing page. But meet me on the Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel. Meet us there right now, and let's talk about these marches, which are really being underplayed. Attorney Anastasia Sinat. Of course, she is a professor of immigration law at Roosevelt University. Yes, I've made you a professor. Adjunct, I don't care about that. Be quiet.
Yes.
Social justice advocate, Dr. Alia Amar. And of course, Lavonia Perryman, award winning journalist, television producer, and host, radio producer, and host, veteran of presidential campaigns at the highest levels and statewide campaigns and local campaigns. Let me start with you, Lavonia Perryman, because as I look at these hands-off rallies, not all they weren't confined to the United States. We saw them really throughout the Western world, and I wonder about. And they were reported, they were discussed all over the world. And it seems like Elon Musk was a particular focus of everyone's ire. But what we're not discussing are the hundreds of thousands of persons who showed up in different cities at the same time. I just heard that I read that hundreds of people demonstrated. Now, we've been marching a long time.
Mm.
So, 10 people, 50, 100, 500, 1,000, 10. When I got to the Million Man March, I knew they were well north of a million people. Because I've been in marches where you had a million people. And so when I looked at the aerial view of New York's march yesterday, for example, I said, goodness gracious, this is hundreds of thousands of people, if not a million. That's what it looked like. Now they can alter photographs, but to me, they would alter them so they look like there were fewer people. But that's not the energy out here. What did you think of hands off and first about the issue and then the reporting? Lavonia Perryman.
Thank you so very much for always involving me in wonderful conversations here on the Santita Jackson Show. Be sure to like her. Be sure to do that, if I must say so personally. And she says that I've been participating at the highest rank. Believe it or not, I worked on her father's campaign and truly elevated me to a whole different level. But speaking of that, I've seen marches from 5 people to darn near 5 million people. I've been there, done that. I must be very transparent about this march and this occasion and this time. I'm conflicted by millions of folks showing up on April 5th. I just am, guys. I'm just telling you the truth. Millions, healthy, wonderful, great Americans of all race, creeds, and color. And I asked myself, Vonia, talk to myself sometimes, where were these individuals November? Where were they? I asked myself, I have to ask myself, where were they? Where were we on that day to make a difference in terms of being significantly involved in a movement that would not have to call for a march in April the following year? where senior citizens are nervous, sitting at their phones or hoping that their grandchildren are able to pick up their Social Security check? Or are they going to get their bridge card? Is it SNAP? Is it WIC? Can I take care of my baby? Where were these conversations going on in November? We're having this movement, which I think any movement, don't sit back because it didn't happen in November. Don't sit back. But I want these movements to reflect forward what we plan on doing in the next election, where we have the power to make a change. And in between that, those individuals who are on Capitol Hill, we need to find them and support those individuals. These marches should have significance around what are we going to do with these individuals in Utah, New York, Chicago, Illinois. Marches were just beautiful. And I commend the people who got up and walked and said what they had to say, showed their solidarity. And remember now, I want people to understand, media needs to share with you that this was a diverse, interracial, racial, and religious march, meaning that every race, creed, and color was a part of this march. That says something in America. When you got that many people who will get up and get in a movement and get together and say, we are not going to take this anymore, not laying down. So I commend that, and I understand that. I just hope that it's reflecting what our plan is when we can make a difference.
I hope so. But I think, sometimes people have to see Livonia.
Yes.
Because we put so much trust in people. And I think that those of us who believe in one person or another, one proposition or another, we vest them with all of our hopes and dreams. And we assume that they are going to act upon their better angels. But I think we also have to understand that we're beginning to see how the world is really run. It's not run by one person.
Oh, no.
The presidency, everybody, is an office. It is an office. And there are a lot of people who are involved in the running of that office. A lot of people have influence on that office. And I don't mean the chief of staff.
No.
I mean, now you're seeing the oligarchs who actually always had the run of the place. Not always, but over the decades, they've come to assume more and more power than the president. Anytime the head of the Federal Reserve, when asked if the president asked you to resign, will you? He said, almost almost haughtily, absolutely not. Like, wait a minute, who are you?
And if I may interject, it's you actually right, it's a corporation, it's an organization, it's bigger than what we see in our little box in terms of television. It's bigger than the government, is bigger than that one person speaking on behalf of a party. It's not a party. The parties are only the symbols, examples of what is happening at the White House, in Congress. That is bigger. It's worldwide.
Mm-hmm.
Worldwide.
And that's what we're seeing with globalization.
Yes.
I mean, we're seeing it now. We're seeing it. We didn't see it before, but we're seeing it now. But Attorney Sanat, what did you make of these marches?
I'm not sure if Ms. Perryman was going to the heart of the situation, but I'm going to have to kind of piggyback off her comment. What's the purpose of it now when we needed you in November? I mean, what are you really saying in April when you could have said it with your vote as a voice in November? What we saw was wonderful solidarity, wonderful peaceful march. I do think that what needs to be brought up, and I might be in the minority here, but there were a number of social media influencers that were encouraging Black people not to even attend. And they basically were saying, this is not your fight. There is no reason for you to go out. 92% of Black women voters voted for Kamala. 80-something% of Black men voted for Kamala. What's the point of marching now? Save your energy, save your voice, save everything for the next election, which will be the midterm elections coming up in 26. So it's not as if we're sitting on our laurels and not doing anything, but the influencers in which, you know, for two reasons I didn't go. One, physically I'm challenged and wouldn't be able to attend. But alternatively, if I was not physically challenged, I agree with those influencers. There is no reason for me to fight by marching with no message. Being hands off of what? He's already got his hands in everything. Why weren't you fighting before? What is this really going to do? Marching in Europe, marching across the nation, 1,400 protests across the nation. What is it going to accomplish? Nothing. Absolutely nothing.
But you know, I this is where I disagree. I think demonstrating, because that's what marching is. It does make a difference because you're demonstrating your grievances. When I look at November, there were a lot of people out there who voted for Kamala in November. And then there were a lot of people were voting for change. They voted for, in many respects, a lot of people voted for someone who they felt would deliver the change. And so I can't shame people for who or how they voted, or even if they did not vote, because the trust has been broken. Now, do I think you should have voted? Absolutely. Absolutely. But the trust has been broken, Attorney Sanat, Dr. Amara, Lavonia Perryman. And so when you have that, you have a lot of social anxiety. And that's what's dangerous about today. You know, because people, it's not just that they don't know who to trust. They don't trust anybody, just about. They don't. I mean, the Democrats are at their lowest level of popularity since they've been measuring these things in more than 100 years. And when you look at that book, Fight, which is like about to be the hottest selling book in the country, that gives you the inside story about what happened, all of the machinations behind the nomination. Now, 2 years before November 2024, November 2022, when people asked Biden, namely Roots Action and other progressives, asked him to move over and let us have a primary season so we can have a strong candidate against Trump, he refused to do it. And then we got that mashup in June. And then he handed it off to Kamala, but not really. She got people who did not like her, did not respect her, and they were running her campaign. So it's just like, wait a minute. And she still came, at least in the popular vote, within 2 points of winning. That having been said, I think there's a whole lot going on here. Marching really doesn't matter, because that's why we're here. That's how you got in the country. That's how your parents got here, because people were demonstrating. If you don't, and believe me, there was not unanimity in the Black community on the civil rights movement.
I don't think that demonstration is totally unuseful. I'm saying this particular one that we're talking about, this handoff one, was unuseful. It actually moved nothing forward. It actually accomplished nothing. It showed that.
Do you really think so?
I do, because the tariffs were already discussed under the Reagan administration, right? Make America Great Again came from his campaign slogan. He already talked about why tariffs were bad. Even in Ferris Bueller's Day Off, they talked about why tariffs were bad with the 1930s smoot thing. I mean, this is ridiculous.
Yeah, but you know, but
trade war is something he wanted
Biden
to
kept the tariffs.
lower the stock prices in order to purchase him and his cronies can purchase all of these stocks at a low rate and then be rich.
But I'm saying, but Anastasia, there's more to it, because the tariffs that Trump imposed in his term, Biden kept. He did not undo them.
The tariffs that we're going through now and what we're looking at right now is creating literally a trade war. Canada, Mexico.
Yeah. But I'm saying
trade war that Ronald Reagan tried to avoid.
Oh no.
Reagan did not try.
Wait a minute.
How
Wait.
Democratic Party
Reagan did not try to
economy.
Stop it. Let me give you some facts, some
Well,
receipts.
I,
Hold
I
on.
was,
No,
I
no,
was
no.
speaking. I know you were
I,
talking over me,
I,
but
I am.
Democratic economy
No,
is
no, no, no,
always
no.
better
I'm
than the
hosting
Republican
here.
economy.
Wait, stop. I'm hosting here. And what I'm trying to do is give you some information that might incline you. This is not an argument. This is not the fact-free zone. And I'm not saying that you're fact-free, but what I always try to do on this show with this platform is give people information to give them something to think about. Because there are things that are happening, that have happened, that no one's discussing, like this Lima Declaration and Plan of Action that was written in 1975. That was not written, it was enacted in 1975, and it called for the redistribution of world industry for developing countries. So globalization was put into motion 50 years ago. That's my only point, Anastasia. I want you, just coming out of the civil rights movement, we saw so many things. We had to live through the looking glass. I think Livonia Perryman would understand that. So you see things that people cannot even imagine. And you
I
get
want to jump
here.
in behaviorally if I can.
No, but let me say this.
Mhm.
Because when I brought up the Lima Declaration to several people, they had not heard about it.
No.
Several learned economists had heard about it, like the 10th Partnership for Refugees, which our Secretary of State signed, which is what has got Brandon Johnson and all these progressive mayors, just they're having the rain of Hades fall down on them, when it's the corporations that are bringing these people in, that are squeezing these people out of their countries. I'm saying that there is something else going on here. Before you say anything, I want Attorney Sanat to finish, because I don't want you to think that I'm trying to stop you. What I'm trying to do is give you some information, because as I look at this, there is a lot more going on here than is being discussed. Attorney Sanat.
Well, obviously, I was just triggered by the fact that you were saying that protests and marches had meaning, and that's how my parents got here. I wanted to clarify.
Let me
I can't
say this,
finish
because that was not an ad hominem attack. It was not an attack at all. What I'm saying is, America has never been friendly to non-Black immigrants, ever. And they were not friendly to Germans, to Irish, to Mediterranean people. But if you were Black or brown, absolutely not. And the Haitians, they have treated horribly, horribly. And it was coming out of the Civil Rights Act, with all of the demonstrating that Black Americans were doing, because these marches were led by Black people. Everybody else joined in. What I'm simply saying to you is, we were not going to cute our way into freedom. We've had a legal component to our struggle, but we also had to put on our marching shoes and get out here in these streets. Because that is what FDR told A. Philip Randolph when Black people threatened not to go to the Second World War as soldiers. He said, I hear you. I know you're being lynched. I know you're living under Jim Crow. I know you're living in hell in the United States of America. I know you're fighting for rights for Europeans to get that you do not have in the United States. But I need you. And so what I need you to do is get out there and march and make me do it.
Yeah, all I wanted to say was that I don't discount all marches. I don't discount all demonstrations.
I didn't think that you did, but I just had to say that.
An omnipresent type of feeling. It was just specifically, this hands off did nothing. And I agreed with the fact that there were so many Black people that stood down. Now, I would like to hear what the doctor says, but I'll be right back.
Oh, no question. And I know they stood down, and they're being told like they came and protested at Operation Push yesterday. And they were calling us the traitors of the movement. I mean, I don't know what to say. I'm not saying that you were on that team. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying you got a whole lot of people telling you to stand down, but what do they do? Oh, how are they standing up? Who are they feeding? What are they doing? I know Push is open 6 days a week. And if folks can get a job, can get some food, they can come there. We try to help them when we can. But these same folks who are out here who are telling you what not to do aren't doing anything. That's my only problem with it. Hell, if you come up with something that's gonna, if you're gonna pass out some food to some people, if you're gonna be of service to people, then you're on the field. Otherwise, you're not even in the cheap seats. You're sitting at home watching the game. And that for me, given my background, people I know died, were killed. They didn't die, they were killed. Dr. King was taken from his wife and 4 children at 39. He had the heart of a man, of an aged man who was almost 70 years of age. He was a young man. I can talk to you about Charles Billups. I can give you a whole lot of people who got out in these streets while the right wing were paying black gangs to graffiti the walls in our neighborhoods, telling them not to vote and telling them not to march.
Mhm.
I'm sorry, Dr. Amara.
So I have a different feeling about hands off. I actually feel that when you see revolution, whether you're going back to the Roman revolutions, the French Revolution, to any of the founding revolutions that eventually kind of contribute to the thought that emerged around the American Revolution, what you see are people who have tried to figure out how to survive under an existing empire until that empire made the issues personal safety, personal bread and butter. You know, people don't get up and vote in this country in the numbers that we need them to. And I don't always know why they don't. I mean, I watch politics like other people watch the Super Bowl, but I probably won't watch the Super Bowl. um, but for other people, they don't get involved in November. What I heard from a lot of folks as that election was coming up was, well, maybe he'll be better. Well, you'll have Congress to constrain. The president can't do everything. He didn't do everything he said last time. You know, you guys are making too much of it, blah, blah, blah. And there's a complacency that I think most people psychologically need in order to function day to day, because they just, all of these complexities and who's running what and what, you know, how did things get started, what was the history, all that, it goes sometimes over the heads of a lot of people, but it goes past their hearts and their interests, and so they don't become interested until it becomes something like, oh wait, why can I not buy eggs anymore? Wait, my aunt who gets Social Security and lives in Section 8 might need to come and live with me because Social Security is going to be messed with, whether they're saying it is or not. And Section 8 could be gone because the government is being dismantled from within. And then people start paying attention. And it's very unfortunate, but it's not new. It's happened in every single society and specifically in every single empire. So when you see people getting to the point where they began coming out in droves, one of the things that I was thinking a few weeks ago was, as much as the actions of the current administration are distressing, they are hitting at something that everybody dislikes. Department of Education's gone. Wait, what about student loans and free lunch at school and breakfast? And wait a minute, my kid didn't need free lunch, free breakfast, or any of that. But they have an IEP. They have an individualized education plan that I had to fight a year or more to get because they have some level of special need, anything from dyslexia to ADHD to anything else. They, you know, lots of people have this, and I got to tell you, people in some communities who may not have what we traditionally thought of as a need for special ed will come and find a way to get some special resources when it's time to apply for college, and they want a different level of consideration for their kid who slacked off or something. Oh, he's not a slacker, he's got ADHD. Surprisingly, he didn't have ADHD for 17 years up to now, but he's about to start college. Let's get something else going. But that requires structure. That requires, you know, all of these systems. It's not just the office of the president. It's all of the offices of all of the departments that they're beginning to go into. And then if you're a person that feels that somehow You're existing in a bubble in the United States of America, and government doesn't really affect you at all. I don't know if you live in the woods or something, because if you're driving on a road, if you're paying a tax, if you're avoiding paying a tax, whatever it is, government affects you. Government affects you more than anything else. It governs what you do, what your freedoms are, what your rights are, and what you do in your day-to-day life. But if you're a person that had the feeling that, it wasn't really that, well, then they brought it to your personal purse. The news stories that are really getting a lot of people out there who may or may not have cared about Black Lives Matter, the genocide in Palestine, whether or not poor people have anything. What are they upset about now? Oh, you're 63, you're 67, you're 69. You've spent your whole life not only paying into Social Security, but you may be among the Americans who have been able to, despite the fact that many Americans live check to check, day by day, who have been able to put aside some money into a 401k. And here you are at the tail end of your working years, ready to, live off of that money that you have been told by every economist is the right thing to do to secure yourself so that you can be in the group that complains about people who want entitlements. Yeah. Now your money is gone. You're losing tens of thousands of dollars that you don't have the time and the work years left to put into and get your money back. That's why people are out on the street. They manage to anger people at every level on different topics, both nationally and internationally. Look at France, Denmark, Belgium, Germany. People are out on the street protesting America. And I would say that in part, that kind of energy, while the politicians are not going to initially act on it, people out there marching and people out there talking and having those conversations will hopefully be people who do realize the power of the ballot for the next series of elections. And some of those people are going to be people who organize and run in the next series of elections, provided that we still have elections. So that's what I would say. Psychologically, people get involved when it's about them and about their kitchen table issues. And you've never seen, or I've never seen in my lifetime, an administration that in less than 100 days managed to, and pardon my language, piss off everybody for a different reason.
Yeah.
And that's what you're seeing on those streets.
And and I want to know what you all think about that, because it's I just can't help but think that there is a not only is there a lot going on here, there's much more than meets the eye. Because America, there are so many safeguards in place. And to see it unplugged this way makes me go, wait, because I keep hearing Elon Musk talk about the prospect of insolvency.
Mm-hmm.
And see, we're antagonizing Dr. Amar, Attorney Sanat, Lavonia Perryman, our banker. Our creditors are the Chinese. And we have this, at least a publicly antagonistic relationship with them.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know how you antagonize someone you owe. That just, to me, is just kind of crazy. I don't get it. And in the meantime, it's the Western nations who've been upheld by the global South. The global South is coming into their own.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the hell that was raised over the weekend was from the Western nations.
Mm-hmm.
Because they have been built largely on the backs of the physical backs and not just the physical labor, but the riches that are buried in the soil and underneath the ground of the global South. And they don't have the free reign that they used to have. I mean, what we're not discussing with Greenland, Livonia, and anyone can jump in, the vast resources that are there. And the vast resources in the Ukraine, the mineral resources, the fertile soil, all of that. And to see the prime minister of Denmark go to Greenland and say, we will not be annexed. I'm like, sweetie, this is not your land. You're not Inuit. You're not an Eskimo. You are European. What you doing over here?
I think
I'm just
a better
saying.
example of that. I think
I'm just looking at. I'm like,
Zimbabwe.
what are you talking about, huh?
President Mugabe, when he did that in Zimbabwe, where he took back the land that the white people had in farmland.
First.
Yeah, I mean, and what happened? How did the world respond when he took back
the Western world
stolen? Right? How did they respond?
The Western
I want to pivot for just a moment, and I want to really talk about what really needs to happen moving forward. Now that we've had this protest, messaging from the Democratic Party definitely needs to change. And it needs to be more focused on November 3rd, 2026. Because out of the total of 468 seats in the United States Congress, 33 Senate seats and all 435 House seats are up for an election. This is an opportunity for Americans, if they're really truly interested in doing more of the right thing and less of the wrong thing. This is how you can be hands-on, right? In order to get his hands off. It's to really focus on which of those 33 Senate seats are open and how we can switch it. Number one. Number two, which of the 435 House seats need to be switched up? Either getting rid of the old, bringing in some fresh people like Jasmine Crockett in order to make sure that we got voices in there, or, flipping the seats from red to blue or independent if necessary. It's really important for people to switch the narrative from just hands off to how can we be hands on? And then maybe we can get some of these thousands of federal workers that Dr. Amara had already mentioned that had been fired. Maybe they can get their jobs back and they can be on a pathway to restoring the economy. All of the things that he's done to disrupt the United States can be undone before the 2028. Why wait until 2028 when we can do it in 26?
Well, we've been talking about that. We pivoted out of the 2024 election talking about 2026. And we said that on this show. Coming out of the election, we said, no, we're on the clock. But remember, the federal government 80 years ago, 4.5% of the country was employed by the federal government. 4 years ago, that was down to 1.5%. Those numbers are not going to rise anymore. What we need to do, when I stayed in Denmark, when I was in my teens, one of the things that I saw that they did that was very interesting, if you lost a job or if you wanted to quit a job and move into another profession, you could be re-educated. The state provided space for you to go to school. I don't see, and America has to do that. Because you can't just treat people like they're garbage and throw them away.
If I may interject here, but that's what's happening right now.
Yeah.
And then that's what's happening, let me back up. The men and women at the White House right now, and this organization that we're speaking of, is attempting to do what you just said. That's what's so scary. And it goes
throw
back,
people away.
Right. That's what they're doing. And just think about it. At the Smithsonian, the African American, the Smithsonian, the brother decided to take a leave.
Lonnie Bunch, Dr. Bunch.
Yes. Now, the question is why? But we know why, because they went in there and said to him, we're getting ready to dismantle, cut off your money. That's exactly what was happening. And that was the discussion. And then you read in the news, you talk about the media. Then you read on Wednesday and Thursday, oh, he's taking a leave. Well, you and I, because we're in this business, the four of us, we kind of get what's going on. But the public doesn't know that this young man was lifted up, the institution. And then there was individuals down the street, I'm talking about the White House, who said, oh, we're getting ready to take back whatever you have to move this institution, the Smithsonian, forward. Whatever is going on, it is not going to be what you call the big D, diversified. And so here we got a man who disappeared. What's that about? We need to ask the question. It becomes personal. You're back. I so agree with you, doctor. It's personal. When it becomes personal,
Mm-hmm.
there's reaction.
Mhm.
There's it's something that's in your gut that says, I got to get up and march. I got to get up and write a letter. I got to get up and get on Facebook or TikTok, and I have to say something, do something collectively. I agree with you, attorney. We must take what happened over the weekend with all of these people all over the world and give and provide a challenge and provide a opportunity to do something with all of that energy, all of that energy. And that is right now, what we have right now, my sisters, is a vote. Think about it.
But we
Well,
have to move the vote, we have to move the activism into the
yes,
vote.
yes.
And one of the things that came up this week is what Representative Jayapal has put together in terms of her resistance labs. She had an initial one. It went under the radar for a lot of folks. She had an initial one to teach people how to resist.
Mhm.
What are the steps? How did
Yes.
Dr. King resist? Where
Mhm.
can you, how can you put together your neighbors and your friends and build and be part of a movement? But also, how does that then connect you into what must be the next level of change for it to be effective? Because I also agree with both you and Attorney Sanat. It's not going to be effective if all it is yelling into the void. It must eventually come to people who make decisions and decisions on behalf of the people who are out there protesting and fighting. And so Representative Jayapal's resistance labs, if you go to her, if you just Google the resistance lab and then look for Representative Jayapal, you can click in. The next one is on April 13th. That's next Sunday. And these are going to be streamed online. If you get friends and neighbors to come with you, you all can learn together, but you can also then take that group of friends and neighbors and say, okay, what are we going to do? What are we doing from here? And that those groups, those people must also include in the what are we going to do? What is the next set of elections? How do we influence the 435 members of Congress? What can we do to make sure that they represent us? Who needs to run? Who needs to be primaried? Those are the types of things that we now have a bit of time, not much, because we're
Mm-hmm.
almost at a year and a half now, but we have a little bit of time until the next set of elections that can help to shape that. But think of all of the politicians, think of all of the spots that aren't just Congress. Think of the school boards, the village trustees, the mayors, the governors, all of the people who are in office who need your support as an electorate, need your engagement, but also need you to begin to show up, bring your friends, come to a town hall. We're seeing some of that emerge, but we got to use every tool. And I'm going to be engaged in the resistance labs part. I've signed up. I'm going to, try to learn more or learn something different or see what's happening. And I hope that many people will, because we've got to transition activism to political engagement and then taking political office. You don't like politics? Change politics. I don't care what they call themselves, Republicans, Democrats, independents, whatever. Vote in the way that makes my life better and the lives of my brothers and sisters throughout the world. In all of the people I love and all of the lands that I love. Vote in ways that make our humanity reflected in our policies. And you can do that regardless of policy if you start putting the right people in, and not just people who are like, hey, how can we give really, really rich people more money and make your grandma live in poverty?
Well, I know it can be done. And we just have to, Dr. King talked about the thing oriented society. That's what we've gotten. That's where we are. He said, we have to become people focused. We have to become a moral people. So this is, in many respects, this moment is a gift for all of us because things needed to be shaken up.
Yeah.
Let's get real about this. Let's not act as if everything was just fine. Everything was all right. No, because we were comfortable. We felt okay. And Robert Williams said that part, Dr. Amar. I hear you. Amen. That having been said, you got to get involved everywhere and in every way that you can. Remember according to the history books, it's not even urban legend. This has been written about in the history books, that after the Constitutional Convention, people were waiting anxiously outside of the hall in Philadelphia. Okay, so what's going on? This woman shouted from the crowd, someone apparently who Benjamin Franklin knew. And she said, "Sir, what kind of government have you given us?" He said, "A republic, if you can keep it." This thing it doesn't run on batteries.
I think President Obama recently said that he was being interviewed and he asked the question, what if I had done what he is doing today as president? And it goes against, so many things that a president has sworn in his oath to do, which is uphold the Constitution. So many different things he has done, not following court orders, either to bring back Kilmar Garcia or to return those individuals that were flown from the United States to El Salvador based on the Aliens and Seditions Act of 1798. These are things that are going against the Constitution. And I think that what we need to do as people is to really think about how President Obama put it. What if he had done that? Where would we be? What would we have done? What can we do? How do we make activism into an action?
Well,
I think we become part of the resistance. I've said it over and over. I agree with you. We have to be, and you have to fit in where you're comfortable in doing whatever it is. If you don't do anything but make a phone call, if you don't do anything but write a letter, right? If you don't do anything but march, but become part of the resistance of someone trying to take your humanistic soul away. This is exactly what is happening today. We need to understand this is not like you said, this is not a game. This is not a battle. We're talking about billions, trillions of dollars that impact those individuals that we will never know. But my $5 will impact my grandmother. And I need to make sure that her $5 is just important as the $1 trillion over there. So you become part of the resistance. You fit in where it works for you in your community. You're absolutely correct. In your community, if it's school board, if the church, wherever it may be, as we close out, we need to understand everyone is responsible for where we are today. Everyone.
But should Congress be thinking about impeachment at this point? Hasn't he done enough in order to be impeached? Haven't we looked at how he has committed treason or how he may have committed other high crimes or misdemeanors?
Yeah, but
they didn't impeach when he, led an insurrection.
Honey, let me tell you something, because that was such a mixed bag, because a whole lot of people were in that. None of that was clean, and none of this stuff is clean. And a lot of these presidents have done a lot of things that have been treasonous, like intervening in other people's countries and getting leaders killed, democratic leaders. So it's just stopped. Well, the question is, where do we go from here? Dr. King said that chaos and community. Where do we go from here? What kind of resist, but also persist in making the country that you want it to be, that we need it to be. Insist that this country become, in fact, what it is on paper. I understand the resistance. I'm totally with resisting, but resisting what and going where? Because you must resist, you must persist, you must insist, you must envision the country that this is supposed to be. We've got to do that.
And we've got to stop thinking that, that really just means somebody else, that we got to find somebody else. Maybe there's somebody who's smarter, or they know more about politics, or they're more connected or something. a, a republic, if we can hold it, means why
You.
aren't you enough? You know, and that's one of the reasons that I've been, kind of for the last few days since I learned about it, pushing this idea of getting engaged in things like the resistance labs. But there are other ways to get engaged. The people who are showing up at these town halls, holding these empty chair town halls, they were organized by somebody. And very frequently, it's just a neighbor that has had it, right? Senator Cory Booker, who just made history again this week. I remember when, he was Mayor Cory Booker. I remember before he was Mayor Cory Booker and he was activist Cory Booker, there was a snowstorm in his town and he came out with a shovel and was shoveling, like if he walked past your neighborhood and you hadn't been shoveled out and he knocked on your door and you were like an old person or a person without a shovel, or you were differently abled, he shoveled for you, right? And people just started sort of admiring that. And people might say, okay, well, he had a whole lot going on before that. That's part of image management, image creation, and things like that. But of course, people don't just come out and they're like, hey, I got a shovel in my hand, make me mayor. But I've got a shovel in my hand. Why don't you have a shovel in your hand? How can we talk about why the city doesn't do something bigger? How can we talk about putting people in office who care or who seem to care? And that took Cory Booker from being an activist and social advocate for his own community into the United States Senate. And as he made the point, he is the descendant of both slaves and slave owners. So we have to look at who we are and how powerful we are and can be. And we got to stop some of the nonsense. You were right when you said, we can't allow ourselves to be placated. Reagan came in and it was this reaction in so many ways to the burgeoning rights from the civil rights movement. Let's put some caps on this. But what did they give us at the same time? I'm old, so I kind of remember. We got Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous on our television. We started getting more television stations to show us more things about people that weren't living anything like us. We started wanting to be a things-oriented society instead of a people-oriented society. We became so materialistic that we needed somebody else's name on our bottoms for our jeans, or they weren't good enough. I was watching the Emancipation Road documentary recently. And then I just started, I go down rabbit holes too, Santita. I just started Googling photos again because it's been a while since I've listened to the former slave diaries that were collected during the Great Depression when they went out and spoke to former slaves, and you can hear the actual voices of our ancestors talk about what their lives were like. I also used to pair that with going into the internet and looking at the pictures. And I swear to you that there is hardly anything on this earth that is more heartbreaking than seeing things like children completely dressed in rags. I mean, just rags. You don't know when that pair of pants was actually a pair of pants, but it was rags, right? And so we weren't as a people or as a society, folks that were like, what I want? I want a gold necklace. We were people who we needed a pair of pants. But what we really needed was a society that stopped putting us in a position where we had no rights, no ability, no economy, nothing so that we could do for ourselves. And Dr. King's movement was not focused on making sure that you could have a pair of Jordans. It was making sure that you could have a job and that you could vote for a person that would take care of you in your community.
Well,
That's
and it was,
for.
and if you don't mind, because I literally
Oh, I know.
minutes left. No, it's okay. It was a moral revolution. The
Yeah.
creed of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, the organization my parents came out of, the one that he and Reverend Wyatt, Reverend Ralph Abernathy, and Fred Shuttlesworth and others founded was to save the soul of America. It wasn't black,
Mhm.
white, brown, yellow, red.
Mhm.
It was because he knew that they knew America was sick.
Right.
So the question is, like I said, who we gonna be? 1 minute for you, attorneys tonight, because I got to get out of here and get to the next segment.
But the only thing I wanted to say is that Dr. Amar brought up something that I thought we forgot to mention, which was the insurrection of January 6th.
Mhm.
Thousands of white people were able to march peacefully yesterday, no arrests, and they certainly did not go and attack the government and try to I guess you could say, in the Haitian Creole phrase, coupe tête and bouiller kai, which means to cut off the head or burn down the houses. So if we were able to avoid that yesterday with thousands across the nation being able to do it, January 6th should definitely be something that we should be able to use today. That's all I wanted to say. Thank you, Dr. Amar, for reminding us of that.
Lavonia Perryman.
I just want to say that the marches and the marchers, what are we going to do next? Where are we going to take that energy? Let's use the energy that we saw and elevate it to an action. And in the next conversation, that we will see something that we call change in our communities.
That's right. And and find out where the country's really going.
Mhm.
Now's the time you need to find out what the finances are. What are the financials? What's really going on here? Ask some deeper questions, because there's too much chaos for us not to be paying attention to that. There's a lot going on here, and I want us to be mindful of that. And let us turn to each other, not on each other. We need each other now more than ever before. There was a time when we used to get a bucket of chicken. Now everybody gets an individual meal. We've become very selfish. There was a time when you had multi-generational households. Those enslaved persons or formerly enslaved persons who were wearing rags, they also sent men to Congress.
Yes.
They got the right to vote.
Yes.
They helped to march to get women the right to vote.
Yes.
So while little becomes much when you place it in the master's hand, as the song says, God uses ordinary people. So these people, they were mighty and noble people. Who are we going to be?
Yes.
That's the question. Because this is the same thing that happened to Moses' people. He came back from the mountain after I've delivered you from hell on earth. And you have started wearing Jordans and Jordache jeans, lifestyles of the rich and famous. And it happened before then, because Dr. King wrote about it in the late 60s. So, that's the tendency in America. So what are we going to be? Because we kill people and don't think about it. We just continue to fund wars and take people out because we feel we have the right. Come on, y'all. Choose this day whom ye will serve. Think about that, everybody. Let's talk about Yemen in the next hour, which is about to begin in like 2 minutes. But Lavonia Perryman, award-winning journalist, television and radio show host, and producer and writer, and you didn't just come in the Jackson campaign, all the presidential campaigns since then you have been working in, and attorney, Anastasia Shanat, brilliant immigration lawyer, and professor of law, my soror, and social justice advocate, Dr. Alia Amar. That's right. I love her. We go back and forth, and we do, because steel sharpens steel, and we wouldn't have it any other way.
Yes, ma'am.
Love you, everybody. Come on over to the Santita Jackson Show. Let's talk about Yemen. You really need to understand that the app was really not the issue. There's a story behind that story. We need to talk about that. Why are we bombing this poor little country? Well, maybe because they're standing with the poor and the beleaguered of the world. Have you thought about that? Who are they? More on the Santita Jackson Show. AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota.